Hello, my name is Anthony Guevara, student ID 103287770. This is the Industrial Relations Report about the European Union. For this assignment, I chose the country of Italy. As we have learned, Italy is one of the founding countries for the European Union. There are currently 27 countries in the European Union, but it was one of the founding five, with Germany, France, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands in 1958. As Italy is one of the oldest countries with a metropolitan development, it has a rich history of labor spanning as far back as well as ancient times. As we have come to know, most labor was in the form of livelihood. A person's profession was their skill that sustained their survival. A person didn't work for a butcher, they were the butcher. If a person worked for another, it was a form of servitude with a debt, where a debt could be worked off or enslavement, but the market was an abundant resource of artisans that would supply goods and services. Some key events in the development of Italy's unions. Let's start with some of the first unions and what sparked May Day. In 1891, Camera del Lavoro, the labor bureaus that began representing workers. It was during this time that May Day was created, a national holiday that recognized workers' rights and achievements. The Fiesta del Lavoratore, Primo Maggio, May 1st. The fascist era that was a period post-World War I that gave most power to the military as they seized the production in factories and on farms, which led to a time of suppression where labor struggled to survive. Post-World War II was the reestablishment of free unions, and then after the liberation from military rule, after the fascist regime was dismantled, the CGL becomes the CGIL, the Italian General Confederation Labor, in 1944, which becomes the largest trade union that brings us to modern day. 1970, the Statuto dei Lavoratori was enacted, the workers' statute that established fundamental rights on discrimination. Autunno Caldo, Hot Autumn in 1969 to 1970, strikes that led to the Statute del Lavoratore also included rights against unfair dismissal. Pay. Wages were still a topic that needed revision. In 1975, an agreement, Scala Mobile, which was a wage indexation that reflected inflation. This is, however, caused an economic strain. And in 1994, again, the government tries to intervene and limit the Scala Mobile, which causes more conflict and union protests. In 1992, the Maastricht Treaty was signed, creating the European Union. Italy wants to be part of this, so they start cutting spending and making the adjustments to meet the criteria for joining the Union. 1997 through 2003, True Law and Biagi Law are introduced to make the labor market more flexible. It increases part-time and temporary work in an effort to decrease unemployment. It broadens the span of who is included in being able to work, not just union artisans or people that are have that first pick, first right. They broadened the span of who could work, and that was to make, of course, the market more flexible. By 2014, the labor balance has grown heavier on the union side, and in order to create a better balance, the Jobs Act was created, which reduced the protections from being fired, which in turn increased hiring in an attempt to balance the labor market. When you have an overabundance of employees or workers that have a protection from being fired, and that puts a serious limit on who can make entry into the workforce. So the intervention was to limit these rights on the inability to be fired, which allowed more people to be hired and actually an increase in the labor market. In 2025 through 2026, laws are being passed regulating the workers' participation in work life. Strides for metal workers' pay strikes are monumental, reaching over 500,000 on March. All these strides bring us to today's legislations. There's the Worker Statute, which is the laws established in 1979 concerning the prohibition of using audiovisual monitoring, political, religious, or union opinions. The Worker Statute also had provisions concerning the right to organize. It also protected against unfair dismissal. This act is significantly comparable to the U.S.'s National Labor Relations Act. Modern legislation has also included AI with the AI Act implementation, which is a disclosure from employers to employees whenever AI is being utilized and must be used with respect to safety, privacy, and data protection. The Smart Working Rules enforces an employer's liability in workplace safety and health compliance during remote work from the workplace, giving the workers protections in spite of being off of the work site. This is something that, because of COVID and so many people working remote, definitely had to have some liability when working when they were on the clock. So this smart working rule was to be able to, govern and actually monitor that work that was done outside the home, because you're representing the company, you're still doing things for the company, and even though it's not on site, it still had to be regulated to be properly representative of the company, and as well as the safety factors and everything else that could possibly happen in the home or off site. So there was definitely a need for that. Numerically speaking, the union density is considered medium at 32.5%. It's this similarly to the U.S., where the density is at a what you would consider, or what is considered medium, but not necessarily as you would think medium would be 50 to 60%. 32.5% is relatively low considering the amount of people it represents, but still, that many people, that percentage of the workforce is still pretty significant. Pensioner membership is at 40% throughout the three major confederations in Italy. These unions include the CGIL, which is the Italian Confederation of Labor, left-leaning union consisting of over 5 million members, the second largest in Europe, Germany being the first. The CISL, the Confederation of Trades Union, with a focus on the Catholic representation and an organizational dialogue that is more communicatable to all parties involved. This is something that was created to kind of level the playing field so that everybody involved was able to actually understand the verbiage and was more involved with the with all the proceedings that would be represented by the CISL. The UIAL, which is the Union Italiano del Lavoro, that represents members across all sectors with significant branches in metalworking, transport, and banking. The government role in union management relationships is more in regards to being a mediator in times of a crisis. The mediation served as a means to lessen the intensity of the marches and the strikes. The government had to change roles from the mediator to the interventionist, especially during current events concerning the Olympics and the budget of 2026. Globalization has been deeply impacted concerning the unions of Italy. Much like the Union of the U.S., Italian unions have had a decline in bargaining power, wage stagnation, fragmenting workforce, and a shift from the hard worker persona to the safety net initiative that hones in on an inclusiveness that covers those that are in a less reliable position. The weakening of the bargaining power is greatly due to the employer's ability to outsource more efficiently, leaving the monetary needs of the workers short, taking away much of the weight on their side of the balancing scale. Like I said, it's always a a fight for balancing between the workers and the costs and the companies that are being represented. Um, when it's heavier on one side, then the other side's not happy, and vice versa. So, in a ploy to help balance that out, to actually lessen the power of the unions within the scope of the companies, they're starting to outsource. They're starting to go to other countries. It's more of a, we'll go here if and do this cheaper if y'all can't do it at this fair price or this fair wage. So people are getting outraged, and that's why there's been strikes, and everybody and the government has had to have or serve as an interventionist in in these proceedings. So there's definitely work to be done to help balance it out, to actually balance and make both sides happy. In most countries, as inflation increases and the cost of living rises, so do the wages to help accommodate these changes. That's been the norm. That's why inflation goes up. Well, to offset the inflation, they do a cost of living raise. However, Italy is a country where the wages actually lowered in the face of rising costs, therefore causing a wage stagnation, which can be attributed to the lack of proper union representation. A fragmented workforce can be attributed to the lack of ability to the organized workers when the larger industries have shifted to smaller districts that specialize in goods or services, which makes it more difficult to organize in the larger masses to obtain those changes sought after. Because the unions, they want these increases of wages because of inflation, and this is what they want, but they didn't get that, and now the market is honing in more on smaller districts, smaller specializations that have more a ploy to quality versus quantity. It's not a mass production country anymore for the sake of being considered more higher quality. Goes into less production but better quality, and that's the direction that they've been taking the work labor. The shift into a safety net is an inclusion of contract workers and a network of minimal income schemes. These changes in globalization has led to the reorganization of union structures, a broader span of agreements that focuses more on the smaller, localized companies taking on larger contracts. This brings us to today, a long history of labor relations that can be compared to the histories of most nations and have significant similarities, showing that the basic needs of workers is universal: safety, fair wages, benefits and working conditions, and overall sense of security that promotes a better quality of life.